Eve to me is basically freedom. It's a giant open universe where you can do what.
On a hot summer day in 1981, a bullet ripped through the window of Ken McElroy's Chevy Silverado. It entered his body, sending blood spraying onto the dashboard. His wife screamed in horror as she was pulled from the vehicle and out of harm's way. As she was taken away, more and more bullets were unloaded into the truck. The smell of dust and blood filled the air as the engine idled. Ken McElroy was dead, but who actually killed him? That question still remains a mystery. The murder of Ken McElroy occurred in July of 1981 in the town of Skidmore, Missouri. At the time, most of the town knew who the murderers were, but no one would give up their names to the authorities. Why was the entire town willing to be accomplices to murder? In order to answer that question, we'll have to explain a little about the man himself. Ken McElroy was not a nice person. In fact, he was a law-breaking bully. Ken McElroy was a thief who threatened the lives of anyone who stood in his way. However, McElroy rarely found himself behind bars, and when he did, it was not for very long. He had been terrorizing the residents of Skidmore for decades before the townsfolk decided to take matters into their own hands. If the police wouldn't put a stop to McElroy's crime-driven behavior, they would. McElroy was born on a farm near the Ozarks. He dropped out of school in 8th grade and never learned to read or write. He got a job early on working as a laborer, which eventually led him to Nottoway County, Missouri. Much to the dismay of its residents, this is where McElroy would put down roots and live the rest of his life. McElroy had no desire to continue working manual labor jobs. They weren't lucrative enough, and he desired to have a life of leisure. The only way he could achieve these goals was through the less than legal means. He started out with small petty theft and eventually moved into the stealing of livestock from the residents of Skidmore. McElroy would wait until nightfall and drive around town stealing other farmers' animals. He could then sell the stolen livestock at auction for a high price and make a large profit. The business of selling stolen farm animals was lucrative, but McElroy needed more money. He supplemented his profits by trafficking hunting dogs, which he had a knack for training. Regardless of what illegal activity he was involved in at the time, McElroy did not like to be called out on what he was doing. When someone confronted him, he lost his temper, and since McElroy was rarely without his firearm, someone would inevitably wind up getting hurt, or worse. It was a relatively common occurrence that Ken McElroy would shove a shotgun into someone's stomach or point it directly at their face when they made him upset. In one particular case, McElroy was trespassing on a man named Romaine Henry's land. When things escalated rather quickly, Henry was making his rounds when he came across McElroy, who was not supposed to be there. Henry asked McElroy what he was doing and accused him of trespassing, but instead of admitting his mistake, McElroy flew into a rage and pulled his shotgun on Henry. The confrontation led to McElroy shooting Henry in the stomach on his own land. Luckily, Henry survived the gunshot wound. He rightfully took McElroy to court in hopes of gaining some sort of justice, and instead, Henry only received disappointment. When the court date finally came around, McElroy had witnesses swear he was at home when the shooting occurred. He claimed he was being falsely accused. These tall tales were fed to the jury, who eventually found McElroy not guilty. He was free to terrorize the citizens of Skidmore, Missouri once again. The ability to get out of court cases seemed to be a specialty of McElroy's, although he often had help. His hunting dog buddies could vouch for him and tell the court he was somewhere else when he was accused of crimes. The main champion for McElroy was his defense attorney, Richard McFadden. Since McElroy had made a decent amount of money through criminal activity, he could hire a high-priced lawyer to defend him, and Richard McFadden was really good at his job. McFadden would use every trick and legal loophole he could find to keep McElroy out of jail. He would get hearings postponed or delayed so that McElroy had time he needed to intimidate or harass witnesses, scaring them into recanting testimony or not testifying at all. Inevitably, the longer the case waited to go to trial, the less strong the evidence and testimonies against McElroy became. It was not uncommon for witnesses to find McElroy's pickup parked just outside their property or hear gunshots in the middle of the night as a warning to not testify in court. McElroy was even reported to have threatened witnesses face-to-face before a trial and was not above telling them he would kill them to stay out of prison. McElroy's life was like a tornado. Anyone who got in his path was in danger, and he left a trail of destruction in his wake. The numerous offenses and acquittals of McElroy did not sit well with the community of Skidmore, and they quickly began to lose patience with the system. After the end of his first marriage, Ken McElroy married Trina McLeod, who he met when she was 14 years old. The large age gap between the two was already uncomfortable, but when McElroy burnt down Trina's family home in a fit of rage, the town thought he had gone too far. But Trina insisted it was only faulty wiring, and McElroy had nothing to do with the fire. Soon after the burning down of her parents' house, Trina became an accomplice to McElroy's illegal activities. She would vouch for him when he got into trouble, saying they were somewhere else together. It was not uncommon for her to accompany her husband on visits to harass people around town. Trina was even said to carry her own firearm just in case McElroy's wasn't scary enough. The beginning of the end for McElroy began in 1980 when Trina went to the grocery store with one of her husband's daughters from his previous marriage. The shopkeeper named Ernest Bo Bowenkamp accused the daughter of stealing candy from the store. This turned out to be a misunderstanding, but McElroy felt his family was attacked and that his daughter was wrongfully being called a thief. So McElroy did what he was good at. He threatened and terrorized the Bowenkamp family both at their store and at their
Legend tells of a place where everyone comes together to
home. The Bowenkamps told authorities that McElroy would park his truck outside their store for hours, and knowing the stories of McElroy, they were afraid his actions would eventually become violent. They were right. One evening, McElroy took things a step too far. He cornered 70-year-old Ernest Bowenkamp near the loading dock of the grocery store and began arguing with him. The verbal assault eventually turned into a physical one. McElroy pulled out his shotgun and fired at Bowenkamp. The buckshot exploded out of the gun and ripped through Bowenkamp's neck. Realizing that he would have a tough time getting out of this one, McElroy jumped into his truck and sped away from the scene of the crime. When the authorities arrived, they alerted officers in the area to be on the lookout for McElroy. An officer named Richard Stratton spotted the fugitive and chased him down. This was not the first time Stratton had run into McElroy, and he knew the criminal would try to get out of the county as quickly as possible. Stratton captured McElroy before he could make his escape. After his arrest, McElroy contacted his attorney, McFadden, who began to work on getting his client out of jail. The first thing McFadden did was ask for a change of venue for the trial. This way, he could portray Bowenkamp as the aggressor, and the jury wouldn't be stacked with people who knew McElroy and his exploits already. The story that McElroy and McFadden decided upon was that Bowenkamp approached McElroy with a knife in hand ready to strike. Therefore, McElroy had no choice but to defend himself, which he did by shooting Bowenkamp in the neck. McFadden got McElroy out on bail, which allowed him to start harassing the Bowenkamp family once again. But the family did not give in, and McElroy was convicted of second-degree assault. He was sentenced to 2 years in jail, but like so many other cases against him, the sentence didn't hold. McElroy was able to get out of jail by paying a $40,000 bond until his next trial. At that point, McElroy probably felt invincible. He was angry that he had to fork over so much cash to stay out of jail, and would sit in the town tavern holding a rifle with a bayonet on the end, vowing to finish the job on Bowenkamp. This was obviously a violation of the rules of his release from prison until the final trial, and several citizens of Skidmore testified to the judge that McElroy was brandishing a firearm and making threats. He was called to the court again, but in July of '81, when he should have been answering for his crimes, he was still sitting in the tavern with his gun. The people of Skidmore had had enough of the man who constantly threatened their well-being and caused chaos in the town. They were also fed up with the broken legal system that allowed McElroy to escape justice, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. A group of concerned citizens met at the American Legion Hall in town while McElroy was drinking at a local tavern. Ideas were thrown around on what to do with McElroy, such as having a group of citizens follow him around at all times, kind of like a neighborhood watch for one man. But this was not the final decision of the gathering. The meeting concluded, and the group of Skidmore residents walked over to the tavern where McElroy was drinking. They surrounded the man and his wife Trina at their table. No one said a word, but the tension between the two parties was palpable. McElroy and Trina rose from their table and walked out of the tavern. They climbed into a Chevy Silverado. McElroy turned the key in the ignition and the engine rumbled to life. Then Trina saw something flash from the corner of her eye. The back window shattered and the bullet from a smoking gun struck McElroy in the back. Someone opened the passenger door of the truck and pulled Trina out as she screamed for help. They took her to a nearby bank where she was locked inside. For the next 20 seconds, the sounds of gunshots and the smell of spent powder filled the air. When it was over, the main street of Skidmore was eerily silent. The Silverado's engine was still idling, but the truck was covered in bullet holes. McElroy was dead in the driver's seat of the pickup. He had been shot to death by the citizens of Skidmore. In the end, Trina was the only witness on McElroy's side. She claimed that the killer had been a man named Del Clement, who she had seen holding a rifle, but no one would corroborate her story. In fact, not a single citizen of Skidmore would tell the authorities any details about what had transpired that day. There was a large group of people, and since the shooting took place on Main Street in broad daylight, there were multiple eyewitnesses, but no one would admit to the authorities who was involved in the killing of McElroy. The local police were having no luck getting the people of Skidmore to cooperate, so the FBI was brought in. The authorities refused to let a murder in broad daylight go unpunished. They canvassed the town, going from house to house and business to business, but no matter who they talked to, the story was the same. No one saw anything. The citizens admitted to hearing gunshots, but didn't see who started it, how many shooters there were, or anyone fleeing the scene. The only witness with any information about the case was Trina, and and since no one could or would support her claims, the case eventually went cold and the FBI announced that the investigation would be closed. To this day, no one has been charged for the murder of Ken McElroy. At this point in time, many of the eyewitnesses have passed away or are long gone, meaning that the mystery of who actually was involved in the killing of Ken McElroy will most likely never be uncovered. The citizens of Skidmore literally got away with murder, and whoever was not directly involved was most certainly an accomplice. Now, check out the most shocking unsolved murders in the world, or watch how police caught a murderer from a single clue: the Rolex Killer. What if the city you lived in passed a new law requiring you to own a gun? Would you be glad that the neighbor on either side of you was now fully armed? Would you go out and buy one legally and get a permit for it? Or if you're against gun ownership, would you pack your bags and move to someplace where guns are illegal? Well, in the city of Kennesaw, Georgia, a local law requires every head of household residing in the city limits to maintain a firearm. What is Kennesaw like? Is it the Wild West? Or is it a polite society with no crime? Let's take a look. The everyone must own a gun law dates back to 1982 in Kennesaw, which is a quiet suburban town outside of Atlanta. There are no big chain stores or strip malls. Instead, it's a southern town with a main street lined with locally owned shops and businesses. Just like in any town, there's a mix of people with different beliefs and backgrounds. Some argue passionately for the law that requires everyone to own a gun, and others not so much. So what's it like in Kennesaw? It's quiet. Their crime rate is in line with the surrounding towns, and people wear their guns more visibly than most people from other states are used to seeing. However, everyone who owns a gun must have an open carry permit and have purchased it legally. These rules are not optional. Kennesaw is less like the Wild West and more like any small American town with a slight quirk. The law requiring every head of household to own a gun was created over 30 years ago and claimed to be a crime deterrent. Lieutenant Craig Graydon is always happy to explain the law and is honest in how it has or has not affected the town. In interviews, Graydon discusses that back when the law was first made, crime was not running rampant in Kennesaw. Instead, the law was more of a political response to the city of Morton Grove, Illinois, who passed an ordinance banning handguns within the city limits. The 1982 law required every head of household within the Kennesaw city limits to own a firearm. The law was a rebuke toward Morton Grove. At the time the law in Kennesaw was made, most of the people in the rural community already owned their own guns. Lieutenant Graydon also explains how the law was always going to be unenforceable, so it was more a symbolic ordinance than anything else. It is interesting that although the law requires that everyone in Kennesaw own a gun, this law is not and has never been enforced. There are also exemptions from the law. For example, if a citizen of Kennesaw is morally opposed to guns, they are exempt from having to own one. There's no ordinance in place to force someone to buy a gun or to check to make sure everyone owns one. Really, the law is in place more as a statement than a way to deter crime. You may be wondering what the crime rate is in Kennesaw, Georgia. Is it high, low, or maybe there's absolutely no crime at all? In theory, the law was put in place to maintain order and prevent crime. The thought was that a criminal would think twice about committing a felony in a town where everyone had a gun. Even today, some of the residents of Kennesaw feel that owning a firearm allows them to protect themselves in a way they would not be able to otherwise. But is this true? Is everyone really safer because of a law that requires the citizens of Kennesaw to carry a gun? According to Lieutenant Graydon, the law does not have much to do with the crime rate in the town. In fact, since the law is put into place, Kennesaw had 9 homicides, and there are still minor crimes committed. However, this is in line with the crime statistics in the surrounding area, so it seems that the law requiring everyone to have a gun did not drastically reduce crime in Kennesaw. Graydon actually argues that since almost everyone already owned a gun and the law is not enforced, it's because of good police work and community outreach that crime rates have stayed low. It would seem that the law had no effect on crime at all. Instead, allowing business to go on as usual and not enforcing the law has made Kennesaw just as safe and law-abiding as the surrounding areas. It may surprise you how the residents of Kennesaw feel about the gun law. There are definitely opposing views. Some take the law to the extreme, while others are ambivalent or don't even know the law exists at all. One of the more extreme residents is Dent Myers, who is the 81-year-old owner of Wildman's Civil War Surplus and Herb Shop in Kennesaw. His store is draped in Confederate flags and one of the largest businesses in Kennesaw downtown area. Surprisingly, Myers is adamant that the government outside of the town is against him. He will tell anyone who will listen that they're trying to confiscate our guns, referring to the federal government. It may not be surprising that in Myers' shop you can find shirts honoring the Ku Klux Klan and bumper stickers with racist connotations on them. This is clearly not what everyone in Kennesaw believes in. But the fact that Myers' store is one of the largest businesses in town does say something. The gun law also led Myers to provide charity in a unique way. He used to sell honorary Kennesaw citizenship certificates to people visiting the town. The proceeds from those certificates would go on to buy poor Kennesaw citizens ammunition for their guns. In some places, charity is used to feed and house people in need, but for Myers, who fully embraces the law requiring everyone to own a gun in Kennesaw, ammunition is more important than those other things. It's unfair to judge the town on just one man's actions, however. Some may agree with Myers and the gun law, while others feel different. The United States has experienced mass shootings in schools, movie theaters, and concerts in recent years. When the conversation of gun control was brought up to Kennesaw citizens, you can probably guess where Myers stood. However, other citizens of the town like Andy Crow welcomes the national conversation. He's wary and doesn't want to lose his hunting rifles, but he also feels that things are getting out of hand. Regardless, Mr. Crow says the gun law in Kennesaw is now ingrained in its citizens. He feels a sense of responsibility that he wants to pass on to his kids. This brings us to an interesting statistic in the town where everyone is required to own a gun. Lieutenant Graydon estimates that only around 50% of Kennesaw residents own guns. The other 50% either choose not to or just don't know the law even exists. In reality, the town legally requires every citizen to own a firearm, but does not really hold anyone accountable to the law. Many citizens do feel it's good for the town to have the legislation, though. Shannon Smith, a business owner in Kennesaw, says she carries a gun because she owns a business, not necessarily because it's the law. Many residents are adamant that the real problem with gun violence is mental illness and not guns. Getting people with mental illness the help they need and keeping guns out of their hands is something that almost all United States citizens agree on. Many of the citizens of Kennesaw admit that the country has a problem with gun violence. Not even the town, with a law requiring guns by every household, is immune to the atrocities that occur because of the very weapons they're legally required to own. Now you might be wondering what types of guns the citizens of Kennesaw have. That varies between the owners. Most law-abiding citizens wear a pistol in a holster on their hip. But there are other members of the community who take the law a little more seriously and have gone with a more militant option. Some households have an arsenal of AR-15 style rifles, shotguns, and a plethora of handguns. Again, this is not everyone in the town, but some citizens do enjoy their firearms. The people of Kennesaw, for the most part, are proud of their guns. They're vocal about keeping their weapons and the law that allows them to do so. With more mass shootings occurring in the United States, more pressure has been put on gun laws and lobbyists. That's why not only politicians within the United States contact Kennesaw about their gun law, but also people from around the world as well. Officials from Kennesaw have received calls from as far away as Norway inquiring about their mandatory gun law. The town of Kennesaw has reached somewhat of a balance. Yeah, a lot of citizens own guns, but most of them are willing to have discussions about gun rights and ways to make sure that they're only kept by responsible owners. That being said, the fact that crime rates in Kennesaw are similar to the surrounding areas and the lack of enforcement of the gun law and the number of citizens who don't even know the law exists suggests that the law requiring everyone to own a gun serves no actual purpose. The law is more of a political statement than anything else. Now go check out Could the U.S. Citizens Fight Off the U.S. Military, or watch Common Stereotypes About Americans.
The ultimate streaming trio, Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, are even better together. Far off galaxies, blockbuster.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the second and final part of my free-to-play to Bond series for 2021. Now, over the years, bonds have become more and more expensive, and every once in a while, I like to see if it's still reasonably possible to earn yourself a bond in free-to-play from absolute scratch. Now, if you did miss the first part, there will be a link in the description for that. Essentially, we started on a brand new account with no money and slowly built up our bankroll, mainly through crafting moneymakers, buying and selling items from shop, and a few other interesting ways to make money. Now, at the end of part 1, we ended up with around 1.5 mil in assets, which is still around 4 times less money than we need in total. However, that said, we do have the hardest part behind us. Now, if you guys are curious what to do with the bond once you've earned it, what you do in your first couple weeks of membership, leave a like in the video, and maybe I'll continue this account. Anyway, guys, let's get started. Now, we had a lot of luck just creating emerald rings in the first episode, so we're going to continue on with that for a little while. Right now, there's still a decent margin in doing so, and that is mainly because in membership, players will enchant emerald rings into rings of dueling, so we're just doing the first step of that for them. So we're in the process of crafting 2,000 emerald rings, and we actually just hit level 60 crafting. That's awesome. I mean, crafting training in free-to-play is actually pretty quick, and as always, if you can get decent experience while making money, that is always going to be preferred. Training your account is much more valuable in a lot of cases than making money, but this time we're doing both. Okay, so I just finished up with all 2,000 emerald rings. That took me around an hour and a half to craft them all the while gaining a ton of crafting experience. Okay, so as always, I want to have all of my offer slots working for me, and as we have a lot of money tied up in the emerald rings, we're going to go try doing something a bit different here. We're going to try buying steel full helms from the helmet shop in the Barbarian Village. For some reason, steel full helms have kind of temporarily shot up in price, so we're going to try to meet that demand quickly. Okay, so we didn't end up going for that many of the full helms. On GE Tracker, it's showing that they're going for 1,700 each. I really doubt that many people are going to buy it for that price, so we're just going to go for 28 of them for now. Well, there we go. All of our emerald rings have sold off for a profit of pretty much exactly 300k. Not bad. We're getting around 175k per hour. Doing that while getting a lot of crafting experience, definitely worth your time. Now that said, we're probably going to move on to one of the more powerful moneymakers in free-to-play. One of the big benefits is it's really good money per hour. The drawback is you're not going to get any experience, and you do need a bit of money to get started. Now what we're going to be doing is buying certain specific items from the Grand Exchange and selling them to shops. So normally when people think of shops, you go ahead and buy something from the shop and sell it on the Grand Exchange. However, the reverse is as powerful, if not more. Now if you go to the specialty shop for the item, they will generally buy that item for a high elk price, and normally can buy them for cheaper on the Grand Exchange. One of the best ways to kind of source these items is just to look right on the wiki, look at the shops, and it'll give you both prices there normally side by side, so it becomes a really easy way to compare. Okay, so there we go. We ended up buying a full buying limit of the steel plate skirt. We bought them for around 377 each, and we can sell them to the shop for 650. Now, generally, you want to sell 5 to 10 per world, and then just hop to another world that has been fully restocked. So pretty much every world hop we do, we're going to be making 1 or 2,000 GP, which is really good money per hour, although you can't do this for very long. So there we go, guys. Just like that, we made around 30k in just around 5 minutes. So very good. However, there are some natural bottlenecks here. For one, the buying limit on the Grand Exchange for these items, generally very low. 2, the actual amount of free-to-play worlds you can hop through is a bottleneck, and it does happen on certain items. So do keep that in mind. Now, I just noticed something really interesting. The archery shop will actually buy maple longbows for around 400 or 500 each, and you can buy them from the Grand Exchange for 250. Now this is incredibly powerful because the buying limit for maple longbows is incredibly high, which means there's no real chance that you'd hit that. So I'm really excited to give this a try. There are 2 archery shops in free-to-play, one in Brock and one in Remington. However, it looks like the one in Remington will actually buy your bows for a higher price, and it looks like we finally hit our 20-hour mark, because we were finally able to sell those oak logs off. I guess it's been long enough at this point. Man, we've been in free-to-play for a while now. Okay, so we come down here to Brian's Archery Supplies. This would be the recommended spot if you are going to do something similar to me. Now, we bought these for 250. Now, Brian will buy them for 416 each. However, keep in mind with any shop, the more you sell to them, the lower they will be buying the price at. So normally you only want to sell 5 or 10 of them. I think in this case, we're going to do 10. Okay, so it finally happened, guys. Unfortunately, there is somewhat of a bottleneck here, and that is the amount of worlds that are available. Now, Brian will eat a maple longbow every minute, which means the stock will go down by 1. To get the maximum value, you do want the shop to fully restock, which in this case will take around 10 minutes. I think if you could do this consistently with no stopping, you could probably earn yourself around 300k per hour, which is incredibly good. Now, because there's only around 50 or 60 free-to-play worlds, I can only process around 500 to 750 of those maple longbows at once. Then I have to wait about 10 minutes or so. Now, currently we made it through around 2,000 maple longbows, but to continue to be productive, we're gonna have to do a few other things on the side. Now, we ended up buying around 120 mithril pickaxes for around 400 each, and similar to the plate skirts, we're going to be selling them to a specialty shop, specifically Nermoff's pickaxe shop. This lovely dwarf is going to buy them for around double. Alright, this should be the last world here. After hopping through the worlds, we ended up making around 37k in around 5 minutes, so pretty good money per hour, just not that repeatable. Now, we just did the same thing again with the plate skirt shop, making another 30k in just a few minutes. Very good. I think over the weekend I might try to stockpile maybe 500 or 600 of these to make it a little bit more worthwhile. So after quite some time, I managed to sell off all 5,000 maple longbows. In the end, it probably took an hour and a half of actual sell time. However, we had to do a lot of waiting and breaking in between. And now with that said, we ended up making quite a lot of money, and I don't know what's going on here. For some reason in one world there's 6,000 maple longbows, but anyway, I don't think I can take advantage of that exactly. However, on the 5,000 that I bought, we ended up making 500k in profit. We bought them for around 1.2 mil and we sold them all off for around 1.7 mil. So a very good and consistent moneymaker. Now we have a few things in our offer slots here. We made another 75k on sapphire rings. However, we do also have a couple of other big offers coming through here on the steel plate skirt and the mithril pickaxe. We got 300 and 500 respectively. Okay, so we just made it through all of the plate skirts and we netted around 90k in profit on that one. And finally, after another little while, we sold off all of the mithril pickaxes to Nermoff for another 75k, 80k in profit there. Individually, it's not a lot, but it does add up, and the GP per hour we're making on all of these is quite efficient for free to play. It adds up to be a lot after a while. So I've been working pretty hard here, and after selling everything off, we are actually up to 2.5 mil now, getting pretty close to halfway.
The RPG mobile hit of 2019.
Hello everybody and welcome to Tier 8 Part 2 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. Thank you all for being so patient and waiting for this. I know that's a while between uploads. Really what it is that I have to put uploads out in preparation for the next conspiracy episode, because some of this stuff is so buried and takes so long to figure out that it's the equivalent of 3 other videos. But I enjoy it. I have a ton of fun doing it. I know that you all like it, and I appreciate that you all take your time to watch it. So I still love doing it, but just letting you know why I can't do one every other day. The majority of the research at this point is finding old 4chan threads or websites that were created in 2003 that talk about spacemen and dwarves. So that's where my career's at. A couple things before we get started. For one, this guy, at the time this video is going to go up, is available for 12 more hours. So today's the last time you can get him. Link will be in the description. We've sold over 600, which is way above what I thought it could possibly do. But you guys never cease to amaze me. And you're fantastic. I'm really overwhelmed. So thank you for that. And like I said, if you're interested, link to him in the description. And also this Sunday, I will be holding a charity live stream. The details of it I will post beforehand, probably a day or two in advance. The short rundown, it is for a home in Mexico that keeps children whose families have been victims of cartel violence. And it's a really good cause, and I want to raise money for them. So it's probably going to be a Resident Evil speedrun. No promises on that yet. But the charity live stream will be this Sunday at around 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be more specific as we get closer. But stay tuned for that. Also, I'll get more sappy at the end. But 370,000 subscribers, guys. I'm blessed. Thanks to you all. It means a lot. And thank you all so much for watching. There was one more thing I needed to get to. Oh yeah. Hey son, it's me from the past, now in the present, to tell you about something that you should do in the future. As a man who's become the surrogate father to many boys and girls on the internet, for some reason, I'm here to tell you that Father's Day is just around the corner, and what better gift to give your father or father figure or whatever than the Ridge wallet. I have no better advertisement for Ridge than the fact that after they sent it to me for the original ad, I started using it and have not stopped since. Like legitimately, it's so much smaller than the other wallet I was using that it's just stayed in my pocket and I've barely noticed it. It hasn't gotten in my way like my old one did, and it really is everything you want out of a slimline wallet. The money clips tight, hasn't had a problem holding cash in. The wallet itself is very sturdy and hasn't lost any of its flexibility. It's easy to get cards out. And the construction itself is RFID proof, so you can't get digital pickpocketers taking your card's information. So I am here to once again inform you that using the link in the description below as well as the discount code Wendigoon, you can get 10% off on your order from Ridge Wallets. Like I said, I've been using it, and the only complaint I have is that now checkouts are normally longer because whenever I pull this thing out, the person behind the counter asks about it and says something to the effect of, that's a weird wallet. And I'm like, actually, it's the Ridge wallet. And they say, well, what's so special about it? And then I have to do the whole ad read again. But really, the wallet is worth the money and worth your time, and I cannot recommend this product enough. So once again, use the link in the description or discount code Wendigoon for 10% off. Thank you so much to Ridge for sponsoring my videos. It means a lot. Thank you all for watching, and we are back to the video. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Human immortality, as it's referred to on the iceberg, is tied to something known as the induced amnesia theory. Essentially what it's saying is that the body itself does deteriorate and eventually die, but the human consciousness lasts forever. Or in other words, it's essentially forms as a sort of essence, and it's been the jobs of secret societies throughout history as a means of placing them in their new host. So basically, the soul isn't necessarily a soul that passes on to the afterlife after death and is instead physically given to whatever the next body's going to be. And furthermore, information of this getting out to the public has led to theories throughout history such as reincarnation. So in other words, humans are immortal, but the body itself is not. Elite controls the population with their permission has to do with an overarching idea of the New World Order. Basically, the higher ups develop ways in order to thin out populations, whether it be disease every 100 years or wars over points that they don't actually care about. So in other words, if two governments come to the agreement that they need to thin out the herd, one will pose a fake threat